So I'm really, really thrilled today to be joined by Natalie Amosu. Natalie, thank you very much for giving up your time. And I know we've been chatting for ages before we've recorded, so we've got some great questions to go through, but thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So what I do, just a very brief intro in case people aren't familiar with your background. So I know at the moment you're doing board level consultancy, but you are a really senior marketing and brand leader, and you've worked for some fantastic brands. So CMO of Ann Summers previously, and then you've done big roles with Game, Arcadia, Asos, New Look, and Next, among others. So a retail pro. I know you've been doing some consulting recently within the kind of luxury goods as well, but fascinated to hear about your journey. And we've got some specific questions that will help other people looking to emulate what you've delivered. So should we start off with about your career? So would you mind just giving a bit of context to your career journey to date, and kind of what are those standout moments that you've had as a CMO?
Okay, thank you, Suzie. So I think my career journey to date, I think I'm always quite clear that my kind of USP is that my upline into marketing was via PR in the days of AbFab, which then kind of honed my communication skills, and slowly through the world of marketing, as it has excitingly evolved and changed, and from being online to being multi-channel to having social, there's been lots of ebbs and flows along that way that has led me to my kind of CMO positioning. But I think my biggest thing is that the brands that I've worked with at a leadership level have been in transformational times, in challenging times. So I've definitely got the stories to tell and the celebrations to share. But I think for me, the biggest thing about my career today is just having those standout moments where I've joined a business at a key inflection point, where they've wanted to change. When I was at Game, originally I joined as a consultant, and I came in, and I think everybody in Game was like, who is this person from fashion? Like, what is she doing here? And initially it was around the emergence. The trend at the time was content. Everybody was talking about content. And I kind of did a review, did what I do best, got to know everybody, got under the skin of the business, and realised that there were 36 people in that business at that time with content in their title, but actually their interpretation of what content meant was very, very varied and different. So it was really around getting the trust back from the big game guys, so the big publishers and the PlayStations and the Nintendos and Microsofts of the world, but actually going gamer first and having that experience to be able to engage and get the respect back. And really, gaming is no different to fashion. People are very dismissive if they think you don't know what they're talking about. Like if you're passionate about fashion or if you're passionate about gaming, and I think it's really getting under the skin of that passion. And my time at Game enabled me to realise that your skill set as a communicator, as a marketing professional, as a brand advocate, it doesn't change as long as you can really understand the end point and be able to communicate internally to everybody your why and why we should all be excited about moving forward in the same direction. And similarly, the same thing for me, a standout moment was obviously joining Ann Summers. I mean, what a brand. Yeah. I'd known Jacqueline previously and went into the business at a time when the family wanted to make sure that they were culturally relevant, but kind of still protecting the essence of the brand and what they stood for, and, being unapologetically Ann Summers. And I think it was a real defining the difference between sexy and sexual, and understanding and respecting that that's different for everybody, and it should be different, and that should be also respected. But to be able to push the brand in a way that was provocative and playful, but memorable, and actually to have David Gold, DG, who was the late founder of the business, say, do you know what, Natalie? I finally get marketing. And us all kind of cheering and having a kind of silent high five in the room, because I think it's around, and certainly the exciting thing about the landscape today is that you are a lot of people couldn't be, well, could be, let me get my words straight. A lot of people could actually say, well, marketing, a CFO who doesn't have a good relationship with marketing could easily say, well, that's just a lot of money. What is it bringing me? Because there is a long tail to effective marketing. And often, and I think certainly for DG's generation, he associated marketing and investing in marketing with big money on TV, and how would you ever track that? But actually, with the amount that's available to us now, to be able to, have those conversations, get involved in the conversations, be able to be visible, grab people's attention, make people stop and kind of look at what you're doing, and then be able to be part of the cultural conversation. It is truly exciting. So it's probably a very long-winded in some ways, but hopefully succinct way of kind of my dance into that CMO role was definitely media, communication, making sure that the brands I worked with were always commercially relevant, I think one of my leaders at New Look actually said to me, it's about failing forward. And I've used that a lot. Sometimes having a good idea in marketing, people can have their finger on the pulse way too early. It doesn't mean it was a bad idea. It just means that the timing was off or the execution could be better. So I think it's about celebrating those successes. And, lots of my previous team members will probably be eye rolling if they hear this, because I am a broken record. There are some things that are consistent in the world that changes around you.
But that's what you've learned, and that's what's made you successful. And many things within that. And Jacqueline Gold, what an amazing lady. And communication, you mentioned, and we were chatting before we hit record, in terms of the importance that communication is going to play in the working environment going forward. But yes, I like the fact that you also explain it wasn't a sort of straightforward linear journey to get where you were either, which I think gives people comfort. If you think of people now who aspire to do what you've done, Natalie, so they want to be a CMO, what are your thoughts on kind of who differentiates someone who is ready, in inverted commas, to be a CMO from someone who's a really strong marketeer? So how do you tell who's truly ready for that step up to C-suite?
I think, irrespective of the size of the business, if you are the most senior person in that business for marketing, then you need to have the ability to step out of your lane, of your specialism, because everybody comes in with a specialism, and it's how they kind of knit that together to grow a wider web to trap the customer ultimately. But I think it's about having the ability to step out and look at the impact that marketing has as a whole to the business that you're working with, but also to the community and the customer that you're trying to reach. You need to always be looking and trying to be one step ahead, but make sure that your brand and your purpose stay protected. Because there will be hard times, and in retail particularly, where you'll have to balance your desirability versus discounts and make sure that you are continually moving forward. I think the key thing is to build your relationships internally, to have people really understand what it is that you stand for and what you represent, because it's not just you, it will never just be you. It's the whole army of marketers that you're bringing up through the ranks with you to kind of deliver excellence. And I think but making sure that everybody understands your why, so your team understand why, there might be a hunger just to drive trade, but also to protect your integrity. And I think it's being able to step out and understand the bigger picture and be able to communicate, because quite often, which is why things like this are so, they're taking me out of my comfort zone, because I think more often than not, a good marketeer is the person that is always back of house. So you are always pushing everybody else forward, making sure that it all runs smoothly. You're not necessarily the front of house person, but it's your responsibility to make sure that everything presents so the customer never feels that you're in distress, but also internally, the business feels really comfortable and confident with however sticky or tricky the news may be that you've got to deliver. We all understand what it is we're working towards. And I think if you can align that logic with the passion that you will have as a marketeer, then that kind of means you're ready, because you're looking at the bigger picture, in my view anyway.
And you talk there about that kind of broader commercial context. So is that not only having a really good understanding across all areas of the business, so you're truly involved in kind of what the commercial targets are, etc. You've got those stakeholder relationships that you describe, but you're also really familiar with what's going on externally, in terms of the sector and those external economic factors potentially. So is it that combination of the two?
Definitely. And I think also quite often, or more often than not, marketing will be, it is the beating heart, but marketing doesn't work without all of the other limbs, faculties, to be honest with you. So internally, marketing will be seen as the go-to to get the information or to understand what's going on in the outside world, because they are the people that are probably outward facing more often than others within the business. And I think the key really is to, and I use this a lot, is my analogy is that you will have, and you could go back into the AbFab days or the Anna Wintour, you will have your editor and you will have your publisher, and the magic happens with the editor. The sales happen with the editor because they will look after the front page and make sure that it's really compelling, it's drawing people in, and the publisher is the person that is in charge of getting the revenue, getting the commercials right, making sure that everything stacks up. So in reality, probably the power couple in most brands should definitely be the CMO and the CFO, because they need to go hand in hand. And I've had the opportunity to work with some fantastic CFOs. I think they just being able to educate on your world, but have a healthy respect for the guy that runs the numbers and the person. And when I say guy, I don't mean a man, I mean the person. But I think it is more around being able to understand, what product needs, what is their why, the tech teams, how early do they need to know about this amazing ball of glitter that you're about to throw in their direction. But just making sure that you truly understand your business, but you are confident enough to be able to communicate what's happening externally, and to start a conversation. I think it's being able to read the room, and actually, if you have a seat at that table, more often than not, as marketing, when, unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, you will be the thing that people blame if it all goes wrong, but you will also be the channel that people forget when it all goes right, because it will be. And I think it is, because it is a combination, and it's much better to be able to look at it as a team view, and actually working with the key stakeholders, taking the products that are the ones that are backed, understanding where those hook moments are that might not necessarily be the big commercial lever, but they are the key to getting people on the dance floor around your brand, and really understanding what it is that you're trying to make them feel, and just having emotional intelligence, reading the room, understanding that probably your marketing points that you want to land will fall under AOB on any agenda, but when you get to AOB, if the meeting's overrun, just understand how you can get people's attention and treat the internal community the way that you would your customer.
Oh, very detailed there, and but no, in a good way, and it kind of leads me really nicely onto the next one. So we've talked there, you talked about that kind of commercial, having that commercial breadth. You're going to need that board level influence. What about, one of the questions that seems to come up a lot is, how do CMOs or aspiring CMOs, how do you balance that long-term, I know you will have done this, that long-term brand building? So how do you balance that with short-term commercial pressure? Particularly, for example, if you think of your sector experience within retail, that's very, very. So how do you do that? How do you balance the two?
I think it's commercial pressure is real. It's happening more so now than ever, and competition. I think the goal is to always to know your numbers, and flex your brand when it's appropriate, but also make sure that you stay true to the business priority. You almost, in a way, leaning into my media background again, is knowing your silly season. So knowing when you can be playful with your customer, but then also understanding that, that what is the runway to peak? When is your peak?
Yeah.
When absolutely is it, you're running like a fine-tuned machine. That is what you're doing, and you're protecting your brand, but you are also driving the business forward, and delivering on the strategy and the overarching vision of the business. I think that one of the things, and it's making sure internally, if you are the voice of the customer, that you have a commitment to your external customer in the sense of being consistent and not alarming, and not, if you knee jerk, it's for a reason. It's because you want to, have a mic drop moment, not because you want to panic them or make them question, are you the brand for them? And I think it's almost, you have a right internally to remind your fellow peer group of that, and then collectively, you make a decision as a board, or as a senior group of within the business, of how to move forward. But I think it's basically, knowledge really is power. Communication is key. And I think it's almost that piece as well is never being too afraid to kind of round up and say, okay, so can I just be really clear? This is what we've agreed. Because sometimes, especially when you are the marketeer, you think differently to everybody else. I've had that said to me, and I think it's your superpower. But sometimes you just need to make sure that everybody is on the same page as you. And if you're not, then that's fine, because everybody would, more often than not, say, oh, thank God you brought that up. And yes, actually, just to make the point. And then also agree to then go and communicate to your teams, so that you are creating a complete ecosystem of understanding and visibility, so that when your teams, which you will encourage to work cross-functionally across the business, are all singing from the same song sheet. That's my key.
That leadership piece is going to become increasingly more important, isn't it? Leadership, communication. We were chatting earlier about the kind of, if you could gift skills to people, great communication skills, and dare I mention, I don't want to go off track, but a really good understanding of how AI works would be two of the things that I'd be adding in there. So looking at leadership capabilities, what would you say are the most important when you've talked there about like communicating to the team, getting everyone bought into what that strategy is. So what matters most when you're guiding your marketing team through a period of change or transformation?
So interestingly, when you're talking about AI, I think it is essentially, for me, it has to be, if you're going through transformation, and I have done, you have to humanize first. So, and we can talk about, I know you and I could talk about AI till the cows come home, but I think it is about the fact that is truly brilliant. But actually, if you go, you have to be people first, because there's no one piece in a jigsaw. And in reality, one of my boss at ASOS, it was incredible. She just gave me, within my first induction period, she said, my goal is to always hire people smarter than me. She said, because and I think that's the key to transformation. You go people first, you get the best in market. You want to be learning as a team. It should never, ever be top down. And again, because marketing is quite often the go-to for information or support, or, an update, or just to kind of brainstorm, you need to be able to be people first. You need to know that you've built your team, and you're ready to go into to battle or ballroom, whatever it is. But it's more around just making sure that you have your experts, because you're the conductor. I don't need to be intimate with every last detail of the CRM strategy, but I need to know that the person I have in my team is the best, because then that builds confidence, and allows your team to shine. And if your team shine, so do you.
And then the final one to finish this off, hints and tips. So if someone's listening to this and they want to secure their first CMO role within the next 12 to 18 months, what should they be focusing on?
I think it's building your stakeholders, building your relationships. I think, and I'm sure you will hear this day in, day out, but it is the art of good, constructive communication, and actually networking and building out your network is really important. I think it's good to put yourself into your discomfort zone, because sometimes if you're uncomfortable, you up your A game subconsciously. And I think there is a whole piece about, emotional intelligence that is so important and should never be underplayed, because, you can't always be good cop, but your delivery can land constructively. And I think it's just learning that you are part of a team, you are part of a vision, and you are there because whether you've been brought in for a project, or whether you're kind of a new seat at the table, and you aspire to grow within that business. It's just making sure, ultimately, doing business with people you like is much easier than if you don't. So I think it is around, embracing new technology, being that confidant and that go-to, like building that knowledge, but also being somebody that, it's good to have some fun. You need to, we all work to live, but you shouldn't live to work, but you should love what you do, because that plays out in your effectiveness and how people remember you.
Purpose and joy. That's what we all seek, isn't it, in what we do?
Exactly.
Purpose and joy. Natalie, you're an absolute star. Thank you very, very much for sharing your fabulous answers. I'm sure people will find that really, really helpful as they kind of go on their journey towards becoming a CMO. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, and speak to you soon.